Listen, the voice, a race-based change to the Constitution. Surely that was once called apartheid.
Well, I've looked at this very, very carefully. I've looked in particular at the proposal put forward by the Prime Minister, and I've expressed a lot of reservations about this proposal. And essentially the way to understand this, Alan, is that we are now talking about putting an institution into the Constitution defined by group rights or racial rights. Now, I don't think there's any place in the Australian Constitution for a new institution based on group rights. But not only are we doing that, the proposal then says that this new institution will give advice to the Parliament and to the government across the broad range of policy. That is, not just advising on group rights issues, but advising on any issue that affects the Australian community. Well, so I think when you put this together and look at it, this is something which does not deserve to be passed in its present form.
I agree.
And I think if the Prime Minister is wise, he will review this and look at the model of the voice. If he refuses to do that, then I must say I think this referendum will be defeated.
Paul, we've got 3.8% of the population that are Indigenous, according to the census, and 11 Indigenous MPs in a parliament of 227. That is 4.8% of the parliament. Now, there is significant over-representation. And then at my last count, there are over 50 government-funded entities giving a voice to Indigenous Australians. There is no one voice for Indigenous Australians. That's what the Indigenous Australians tell me. There are many voices. But isn't Jacinta Price entitled to ask why her voice is ignored? I mean, we don't need ears. We need ears, rather. We don't need voices.
Well, I think this is highly pertinent. I mean, we've got 10 or 11 Indigenous people in the Australian Parliament at the moment, spread across the parties, which is a good thing. So how do they relate to the voice? Who actually speaks for the Indigenous people once the voice is set up? Does the voice speak for the Indigenous peoples? But surely it can't speak for them all. So I think there's a problem with that. What happens to the Indigenous MPs in the House and in the Senate when from time to time they'll have a very different view to the voice? I mean, these issues are not being discussed.
Not at all.
This issue about the voice being put in a referendum has not been properly discussed in the Australian debate. We should have had a parliamentary committee looking at this, or some form of mini constitutional convention looking at this. To this point, we've had neither.